Donald fucking Trump. These are two words, two names, first name and surname, that have been driving everyone mental. Whether you're a fan of his or you're not a fan of his, he's just in the media all the time, right? And it's very intense. But I think one of the reasons that the whole Trump thing gets on people's nerves, whether you're a supporter or whether you're not, is because people are very extreme. So you may be thinking, how could someone who's a fan of Trump be getting annoyed by the Trump narrative? But it's because obviously there's a lot of hate for Trump, and then there's a lot of like worship for Trump as well. So I thought I'd put myself out here to start and say I am not a big Trump fan, but before all you Trump lovers press unsubscribe and unfollow me and stop listening to this, I'm going to have a person today on the show who would vote for him in the next election, not because he likes his personality, which he's going to be talking about, but because he agrees with his policies, right? And that's why he thinks he's going to vote for him. And he's someone that I respect. So it's Michael Chapman. He's been on the show twice before, actually quite recently, and he did a post recently where he was agreeing with some of Trump's policies, and I wanted to challenge him on those. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a healthy debate because Trump is one of these very divisive issues. But my problem is, and this is what I'm going to be talking about today, everyone is trying to cancel each other, right? Trump is trying to cancel the woke or the politically correct people, and they're trying to cancel him. And that means there's no dialogue. And what happens when there's no dialogue and there's no free speech is society breaks down. And I think that's a very dangerous thing. So what I wanted to do is have a conversation with Michael Chapman. We've got differing beliefs on this, but we're going to be challenging each other and having a good conversation. So anyway, let's get into it. All right, Mr. Michael Chapman, welcome back for your third episode on the Cosmic Bridge. You ready for this one?
So excited. I'm completely not prepared for a good reason. And I'm going 100% freestyle. So
I'm the same as well. Well, I'll give the audience some context here because we did a few episodes ago. We had you on, so you may be wondering why have we already got Michael back on, because I think it took us about 60 episodes to have you on a second time. But the reason is Michael put an interesting post up around a man called Donald Trump, who you're probably sick about hearing of now after so many years. But it was related to Davos and the Argentinian president, who was talking about some of Trump's policies. And it was interesting because I think Michael and I have similar views and values on a lot of things, but we disagree with Trump. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation was I feel like with a divisive person like Donald Trump, and there's many other things in the UK, obviously we had Brexit, I feel like people don't have healthy debates where they're disagreeing with each other. And I think, going back many years, that's what used to happen. And that's why the Trump conversation is so toxic, because people won't have a healthy disagreement like in public. And people are sitting in silos. They're either, oh, Trump is racist, Trump's a bigot, Trump is this, Trump is that. Or, and the other, Trump is almost this like messiah, like holy figure to some people in the US. So I find it's very dangerous on both sides. Yeah, exactly.
Like, what's the middle, right?
Hopefully we're going to be the middle today. So yeah, but maybe just to start, Michael, do you see it the same way? Obviously, I'm in the UK, so it affects us a lot. Our countries are very interconnected. But are you seeing that polarization as well?
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean, I don't know how long we're gonna go, but you'll have to interrupt me because a lot of these go down like cold. It's gonna look like we're going into a cul-de-sac, but it's not. It's a cul-de-sac with like mini driveways. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, maybe I'll start. I thought because you and I obviously we talk about business, we talk about family, we talk about philosophy, but we haven't really talked that much about politics. So, and I try not to get into politics on the show, but I thought both for the listeners and for you, I can kind of give you some of my beliefs and like how then I view Trump in that. And again, I'm not in the US, but just based on like what I've seen from his personality. But I would say I may be considered right wing, and I don't really believe in right or left anymore. I think it's like very antiquated when it comes to family values. So I think having two-parent traditional families, I think, is very important. And one of the ways I came to that, and I think 95% of the public believe this, is when I was 18, I shadowed a friend's dad who is a judge in the UK. And after all the cases, in the evening, he said to me, do you know what's very sad is all these kids I feel sorry for, even the ones who've done robberies, who'd stabbed kids. And he said most of them come from one-parent families. The dad's not around and the mum is working. and she can't look after the kid, and then the kid hangs out with bad people and ends up doing bad things, right? So essentially, that's why I've like, it's very simple, but like, more traditional family beliefs. But on the other side, even though I run a business, I would say economically, I'm not socialist. I believe capitalism is the best system we have at the moment, but I don't think completely unregulated capitalism, like just total free markets, is the best. And
Yeah.
you see so many examples of that with like pharmaceutical companies. There's so many lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies at the moment. Various different. There's so many examples over the years of like just capitalism going wrong. Essentially, I call it like capitalist anarchy. Essentially, so I'm someone who's got very like maybe conservative values on the family side, but like economically, I think capitalism is the best system we've got at the moment. But you always have to be like very cautious of like the way it's operated.
We're just an immediate example relate in the vein like in the US, where even though whenever you watch, like I watch congressional hearings for the entertainment value, specifically to hear Senator Kennedy, is it John? I forget what's his first name. Kennedy. I mean, that guy down in Louisiana, I mean, he drops the best one-liner zingers to criticize the left. It's just, he should be a comedian. It's classic. But watching the congressional hearings, the senatorial hearings with social media, like at this point, it's pretty hard not to support pretty solid regulations with the social media outfits, because but yeah, I'm in your space. I mean, and I'd say like inside of every socialist is a capitalist raging to get out. Every single one of them. So I think we have more shared values across the pond, which is why we're talking. So why don't we just level it up real quick? All right, Donald Trump, 2014, 15, 16, going into that election. Yes, he said all you got to do is grab him by the crotch. Yes, he's crass. Yes, he's offensive. Yes, 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 yes. All of the yeses. Infidelity, you name it. Chauvinist. I mean, go down the list of every ism and ist. Okay. All right. If you're a voter in the right-leaning side of economics, let's just say I'll go libertarian. I don't even want to use conservative, but you're more what you just described. You didn't have a better option.
Yeah.
Once he was given the nomination, once he won the nomination in 2016, 2015, you didn't have a better option. Hillary Clinton was not a better option. We weren't going to have a resurgence of the Bill Clinton. That was not, and what we're seeing, I'm going back in time, the idea that Hillary Clinton was going to come on and it was going to be Bill Clinton redo, point two, it's no, they are the Democratic Party, and people didn't know this then, but we know it now. This is the current administration we're enjoying worldwide, living in the US is a hard left, progressive, they're Jacobins. Okay, this is what Barack Obama wanted to do, but probably was afraid to do, is what we've seen for the past 4 years. And so people that were somewhat more, I won't even call myself educated, but more curious on left and right and trying to evaluate where the country could go and the world could go on your core talking points, economics, foreign policy, social issues, etc. He was like the better of the two evils. Sorry, that's just a fact in terms of how that was perceived. So people that voted for him, and I'm not talking about right wing, Confederate flag flying, racist, Proud Boys. I'm not talking about that. Okay, I'm talking about people that were faced with the decision of Hillary Clinton or Bill or Donald Trump. It was it was a tough one. Yeah. Because he's not back then. He's not. So I'm just trying to level that on kind of where that was. It was like, and you got to remember too, like, there's something that people don't know, and just hold me to this. When Barack Obama did too, was reelected, right? He was elected and reelected 2 back-to-back terms. The amount of people in the Black community that went Republican in 2000. Hold me to this now. 2000 and it's like 8, 10, 12. No, it's 6, 8, 10, 12%.
Okay.
And that working backwards 2020, 2016, 2012, 28. The percentage of the black vote that went Republican has steadily increased every 4 years. Okay. I think it's 6, 8, 10, 12. And now, and then, 12 being 2020, if I've done that right. Now we're looking at, I mean, high teens, depending on what polls you look at. I mean, where I'm going is it's about people that are like educated voters.
Hmm.
I don't mean like college educated, but like look at both sides. We'll get on The View and listen and go and listen to MSNBC or The View on the left, and then go listen to Sean Hannity on the right, and then go to Reuters and go to BBC and try to get a solid sense of what's going on and what's not going on, or looking at it and saying, man, anything's better than what we have right now.
Hmm.
I don't care what he said. I don't care what he said about just grab him by the crotch. I don't care. Anything is better than, 7% mortgages. The world stage that's no longer, that we can't create and maintain deterrence. Afghanistan, total humiliation. Billions and billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, and we don't know what's happening over there. I could go on and on and on. And I've said a bunch of things where people are getting offended already. I know. So that's kind of where we're at. And then underneath that is, and I'll kind of let you respond, because we know that no matter who you vote in, who's really pulling the strings is not necessarily who we see. And I don't want to get into cabal and conspiracies and everything, but I mean, there's a lot of money spent on the Hill.
Yeah.
With lobbyists and corporations. That may be a whole separate podcast, but
I see. And I'd rather go into the Trump stuff today versus the Democrat stuff. But I think that's one of the reasons I think a lot of people are very disappointed by the Democrats, because the Democrats always go into what we were saying, being skeptical of capitalism and big pharma and all these things. It was like the Democrats and the left wing, in inverted commas, they were meant to be the guys who were meant to do that. And now, and this comes to a point I wanted to talk about, is now, like, so maybe I'll come into one of my points about Trump. So one of the reasons I don't like Trump is I'm actually very sympathetic to a lot of his supporters. And one of the reasons I'm very sympathetic to a lot of his supporters goes back to, I make comparisons between the UK and the US, in that it's funny that I grew up in London, but I think a lot of people in London don't understand how life is in the rest of the country outside of London. And in London, we have this problem, we're very London-centric, where most of the economy and like money is like centered in London, and people have no idea like how people live outside. And I've got various family members, various history, and like the rest of the country. And obviously you see this type of dynamic play out like in the US, but with like, California and New York and, East Coast, West Coast versus like, some of the places in the middle of the country, right? So I think there's a lot of people that have been neglected, both economically and by politicians, like in the UK and the US. And a lot of those people like are the people that voted for Trump, right, in the US. So it really irritates me when people say, oh yeah, everyone that voted for Trump is a racist. Everyone that voted for Trump is a bigot. That stuff really annoys me. But I do think that he sold a lot of them a dream that he can't deliver on. And one of the things, one of my more like conspiracy theories or whatever, is actually, I'm going to just say it once, woke in inverted commas, because I don't like that term. I'm going to call it the politically correct movement.
Yeah.
I feel like that movement and Trump, psychologically, the way they behave is exactly the same, because it's the same, whether it's a trans activist, right, on one side, who's supposedly like the opposite of Trump, and someone says to them, there's only two genders, and they say, you're transphobic, you're the worst, and then like leave the room, right? So that's on one side. But Trump is the same, and he, fake news, the whole like cancel culture, fake news thing, it came from Trump. He was the one who was trying to cancel everyone. And then a really good example of this is when we had 4 years of Trump, and he fired more of his staff than any other president in history. which just goes to show if you disagree with Trump and you say something against him, he's going to get rid of you. So I feel like
A lot of
psychologically,
that
the
had to
whole
do
like,
with, I'll just interject. I don't think if he
yeah,
gets reelected, he won't make that. He didn't. I think he had more support because he was a Republican on the right. He had a bunch of, he had people like Omarosa, the Mooch. I mean, he had people initially in his sphere. Thank God he fired him because none of these people were loyal. Him trying to build the wall, he had his own DOJ, Department of Justice, working against him. I don't know who he's got picked for if he gets reelected, but you know, he's going to have to do some major gutting of, you know, our institutions because none of these people are with him. So we'll probably see
yeah.
that again. To your point, go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah, and then there's, people like Steve Bannon, who apparently, he's going to bring back in. So I do think there was a lot of people. And one of
Yeah.
the other reason going to Trump, like being, and again, you're not trying to argue that, as you said earlier, like he's an honest and integral person, right? He's clearly shown in a lot of ways he isn't. But I think politically, which is obviously what he's being elected to do, I feel like he just said stuff in the last two elections that he thought was going to win him votes. If you look at him, he's actually, I think he was on, I can't remember what chat show it was, like 20 years ago, saying, I am going to run for president. I'm going to be a Democrat, right? He was literally on camera saying that.
Yeah. He flipped on abortion. He was pro choice.
So
20 years ago.
yeah, I just feel like he's flipped on a lot of things. And I saw a
Yeah.
rally of his where he's like holding one of his books. He's like, this is my second favorite book of all time. My first favorite book is the Bible. He's never gone to church. He doesn't know anything about the Bible, but he's like, okay,
the photo op he did out in front of the church in New York when it was when we had the summer, we call it, I think it's the summer of love, 120 days of looting and whatever. The church was burning or whatever. He's standing out there, he's holding it like this, man. Like, where's a book? I need a like he's holding it like this. Why is he holding it? No one holds a Bible like this. It's more like, you're doing that. Totally.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So anyway, those are a few of my beefs with Trump. So yeah, I'll pass it back to you.
So what's there's so much to talk about, but at the end of the day, people are looking at, really what's going on with energy. That I think a lot of, you can kind of, and going back to, let me start back, going back to Barack Obama when he came out of office, and you looked at the exit polls, primarily with Black America. Like, for example, the Democratic Party, okay, let's there's gonna be a lot of juxtaposing going on here, all right? The Democratic Party is specifically what's happened since Biden's been in office with 8 million people that have come across that border. You can tie that to a lot of things that were written about, what's the word I'm looking for? Changing the demographics because of what happened in the exit polls, not just in 2012, but in 2016, 2012, 2016. And that is people that they count on, specifically Black America, Latinas in America, okay, are saying to the Democratic Party, we're not happy with you. Slowly over time, those numbers are irrefutable. Okay. And then over here, you have this like crass guy that, when he came down the escalator and he was talking about, Mexicans, they're not, don't hold me to this exact, but
Yeah.
I think one of the first things he said that was considered racist was when he talked about illegal immigrants that come across the border and how Mexico is not sending us their finest rapists and this and that. Yeah. The next marker you have of like, and that was twisted by the left, right? The way he said, because now we're seeing that that's true. I mean, we just had 2 police officers that almost, I don't know if they almost died, that had their head kicked in New York. And not only are they illegally here, but you have 2 police officers who are almost killed. And then you have a left-wing Alvin Bragg, who's also one of the district attorney of the 4 that's leading the case of one of the 4 indictments against Trump, who lets these 2 guys out. And as they're coming out, they holding their birds up like F you. Like, so he wasn't wrong. It's just, it was such a shock for that time. We're coming out of a 8 years of Barack Obama, and someone who's very, very isn't Trumpish. I'm not going to add adjectives to Barack Obama because then I'll sound like Joe Biden, who, is categorically racist when he says, what a great guy. He's the first clean, well-spoken African-American. He said that in 07 about Barack Obama. So I'm not going to attack, but I mean, it's polar opposites. Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And he's coming down the escalator talking about Mexicans and rapists. I think the next marker for racism, which really solidified, I'm headed to a point, I promise. I'm kind of setting up.
I've got something to say about the Mexican thing, but yeah, finish your point.
Yeah, about Donald Trump's racism was what happened in Charlottesville. I can't remember I think it's 25th. I don't know what year it happened, but 2017, where I don't know all the particulars of why people were there, but it was a protest on taking down statues. Some guy, you had right-wing extremist Nazis, nutcases there. You had, left-wing nutcases there. You had normal people there. Okay. And he's obviously, there was a guy in a car who ran through and killed people, ran over people, thinking like a Dodge Charger. Okay. And he said, because we had fine people on both sides, and that's the fine people on both sides has been framed and reframed and framed and framed, that he was saying that there's fine people in the Nazi party and the whatever. What's cut off is, and I'm not talking about the Nazis because he said that, but that part got cut out. And so you just see Al Sharpton, Tiffany Cross before she got fired, Joy Reid. I mean, pick the ones on the left that said, that's what's, made him categorically racist, when those are not the right definitions of his racism or non-racism. They're just sound bites that are taken out of context. Yeah, the biggest where I'm going with that is that's the kind of stuff that I wish he wouldn't say. Because even now, someone can take this recording and chop me up and say that I said those things, right? Even though I'm literally quoting or trying to contextually give framing here. He just can't help himself. He can't, no one wants to talk about, I'll give you an example. No one wants to talk about the 2020 election. It was stolen. Irregularities, Dominion voting machines, ballot. I mean, I don't want to talk about that, no matter what I think or don't think about it. So I could go on. So I like the policies under 4 years of what people call MAGA, Donald Trump. I like the policies, specifically economically. We are not better off with Joe Biden. That's just a fact. Inflation is coming down, but everything that we count on, and I think the world, but specific everything that basic staples of life, rent, fuel, grocery, you name it, is up 30%, 20 to 25 in the aggregate, and it's not coming down. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
We're not better off with his border policies. Okay. We're not better off with his how he has handled situations on the world stage. What we did in Afghanistan, how we've handled things in Ukraine, what's going on with, I'll say one final thing. We had peace, relative peace, even though we still have this disagreement. I don't want to get into Palestine and Israel. I don't think that's the purpose of this, but we had the Abraham Accords that really was starting to settle things down in the Middle East from a racist president. I mean, I say that tongue in cheek. Things are worse off under this hard left, progressive, Jacobin, neo-Marxist party that I think people know needs to go. And one final thing, I think you're going to have people on the left, they're going to go into that voting booth and they ain't going to tell anybody. If it's Donald Trump, I think he's going to win the nomination if they don't put him in jail.
Yeah.
And if he gets to November, I think you have a lot of people who are going to vote for him, and they're going to be like, nah, they ain't going to be honest about it. But they're looking and say, well, we can't do 4 more years with that guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's so much I want to say there, but I think maybe Biden being a hard left government, I could dispute that, and that's actually something maybe on the family values, yes, but on the economic stuff, and this is why I don't believe in right and left, because I think it's all over the place. But we'll come back to that point. I wanted to come back to the Mexican thing, because so my partner's from Ecuador. I lived in Colombia for 3 years, so I know a lot about kind of Latinos, Latin culture, Latin community.
My
And it seems,
fiance, my fiance is Brazilian.
oh, there you go. And my brother lived in California, and he was mainly hanging out with Mexicans. And but anyway, I think I know a lot of Latinos who like vote for Trump, right? And obviously there's the Cuban side, which is not in Miami. That's not that surprising because they've like fled communism, and obviously if they're fleeing communism, often you go the other side, right, like extreme right. But then there's
Yeah.
kind of your average Joe Latino that votes for Trump. And a lot of Mexicans vote for Trump after the things that he said, like around Mexicans, which some people are very surprised. But I think what it is, again, it goes to the family values, and people are looking at some of the stuff that's happening with the Democrat Party and being like they're trying to destroy family values in a way, and the whole trans issue and all of that stuff. And Latinos have very strong family values. And that's probably why you're with a Brazilian woman, I'm with an Ecuadorian woman, and a lot of
I've been to Ecuador too, by the way.
Oh, amazing! Let's talk about that offline. So I think that's what happened with that. But the other point I wanted to bring in, going to like fakeness, is I actually think if you look at it on paper, like Biden, because Biden is from a part of Ireland, so my mum is actually Irish, and Biden's from a part of Ireland, which is like the next county along. He's Catholic, always been practicing Catholic. He's obviously his first wife died, right, and now he's in another relationship. He's got very close relations with his, so he seems to have stronger family values than Trump in a way, but he's almost not being authentic as well himself, and he's let this whole system basically get on top of him. And it seems like he's preaching again, like Trump, he's preaching stuff he doesn't even believe in, because that's basically like, oh, I'm in this, woke, politically correct culture. So I actually think like both of them are being fake. And as you said, it's like, who do you choose between two evils?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw in 2020, he was done. And going into the South Carolina primary, he went down there. James Clyburn, I think there was a Faustian bargain made in the back rooms, and these things happen. And, you hear about them. They happen on the right too, but it was like, hey, we're going to prop you up. We're going to resurrect your campaign, and you're going to make a deal with you've got the Bernie Sanders, the Elizabeth Warren, the Obamas, the squad. You got all these sort of interests coming together, and he's going to be, I hate to say it, but he's a puppet. I mean, he's a human being, all right, but he's largely what we've seen is is really what I believe is the extension of the Obama campaign that really he couldn't do or would have done. It could go on and on. I could validate that with some specifics, and so I don't think a lot of what he says or does is coming from him. He's sort of, he's a consummate plagiarist. He's a consummate liar. Most politicians are. But this person, I mean, you talked about his first wife's dying. I mean, here's a guy that and his son, Bo, died. I mean, Bo did not die in Iraq. Bo served in Iraq, but he died of a brain, I think, I don't know if it's an aneurysm, some type of brain thing, years after he came back from Iraq. But every time our commander-in-chief, Joe Biden, is in a situation where there's soldiers who have been killed, just like my son, so he lies on his son. He lies on his wife's death, right? He talks about the man who ran I think the data supports that his first wife ran an intersection and was hit by a tractor trailer. He's talked for years that the guy was drunk. He drank his lunch. He wasn't drunk. And including like the family reached out to Joe Biden. I think he was the vice president. Could you please stop saying that? I mean, the guy went to his grave believing that the world thought he was drunk. I mean, those are just two examples. If I'm willing to lie on how my wife was killed, ex-wife, or my deceased wife was killed, or how my son died, we could go on and on. So that piece right there, and again, you look at Donald Trump, not to that extent, but that guy stretches the truth that I would call lies, just to be fair, so all of that, you're going into these elections, and if you're just a citizen trying to say, I don't want to deal with any of that BS. The question is, where's the country headed? Where's the world headed? Do I really believe that Vladimir Putin goes into Ukraine if we had 4 more years of Donald Trump? When I know that, we caught Barack Obama on a hot mic, I believe, going into his second election. Hey, tell Vladimir to take it easy on my, and I'll be flexible on missile defense. And then he was. I mean, I could go on and on and on. That the left has tried to appease some of these regimes. Reset Hillary Clinton. I could go on and on. That's just not what I think the world needs. And we didn't see that with Donald Trump. In fact, we had more peace under Donald Trump than we did before and after. So I'm not sure how to square that circle, but those are facts.
I don't want to spend too long on this topic because it's speculation, right? We don't know if Trump was in, what would happen. Like 30% inflation, you mentioned, we got that in the UK, and we've actually got a conservative government over here. And the Ukraine-Russia thing, Israel-Palestine, those are kind of like what if. So one of the things you do say that I do want to dive into is, you think it's choosing between two evils, but you would vote for Trump based on policies, which I think is the right thing to do. If you're in an election, you should vote for someone based on the policies, right? So what are the policies that he's got that you believe in?
Limited government. Even though, he printed money during the pandemic. When you look about our national deficit, I think we're going into 35 trillion. I think he printed some money he needed to print, but then he didn't cut it off. I don't think he had the talent he needed around him. I don't think he had the loyalty. So, and I'm not blaming that. That's on him. But then, obviously Biden took it to a whole nother level in terms of printing money. But fiscal responsibility relative to what we had, energy. Let's drill, let's frack. If you look at what what Joe Biden did day one, was he cut off? He pandered and people on the hard left, the climate, what's the word I can use? The climate people?
Activists, maybe?
Yeah, they cashed in some, he kept his commitments. He cut off Keystone, he cut off Anwar. He did a lot of things, no offshore fracking. All of this, we saw that in prices, right, go up. He's drained. And then you look at what's crazy is, going into the 2022 midterms, he's draining the petroleum reserves, the national petroleum reserves, to really bring prices down. I think we're still doing that. So what I agree with is what we do with energy. Let's drill. Economic policies, control to some degree. I don't think Donald Trump controlled spending. I think he spent. I don't know what I don't know what a second 4 years would look like. Foreign policy, those are probably the top 3. I think he waited too long. He could have got out of Afghanistan, and that could have been something. I don't totally blame Afghanistan 100% on Biden, in so much as I think Donald Trump could have gotten out during 4 years. But again, he was listening to people that I think he picked the wrong people. General Milley should have been fired.
Yeah.
I could go down a list. The people that he kept on from the previous administration and the DOJ and the Pentagon, I think he made some bad holdover selections there. And that cost him on some decisions. So yeah, economics, energy, foreign affairs. I could go on, stay out of the social justice stuff. The government's not good there. We're seeing that. Yeah. We could go down that rabbit hole. We've got 40 or 50 years of affirmative action. Looks like the Supreme Court has made a decision, but academia is going to continue to find a way to get around that. Stay out of that stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Affirmative action is like the quotas, right? You've got a certain number of women.
Racial preferences. Yeah. That's how you get a Claudine Gay. That's how you get, that's how you get a Secretary Austin, who, God bless him. I hope he recovers well. But here's a guy who doesn't tell anyone he's going in for a cancer thing. He has cancer, and any private 3 weeks into his military service who goes AWOL for 3 days, weeks, would have been arrested and charged. I'm making my point, like, but you're not going to do that to an African American Secretary of State. You're not going to do it. You
Yeah.
got you got a hall pass.
Well, let's start. Maybe let's dive into this thing because you
Yeah.
said going back 40, 50 years. I wanted to bring up. So I've been on this journey over the past probably 5 years of like really getting into psychology. I started really looking at Carl Jung, and recently I got into Nietzsche, German, and he said, which is interesting. There's this concept of free will that philosophers have, debated about for a long time, and he said that thinking that we have absolute free will is stupid because when we're born, even if you forget the like God and religious and spiritual element to it, in our genetics and our culture, we're carrying around all this stuff, right? The language that we use, the places that we're in, the hereditary, the things we're inheriting from our parents, our grandparents, etc., and all of that stuff. It's not like it's a blank slate. So actually, when we start our lives, we're kind of already down some type of path, right? And to really understand who we are and what's our destiny, we got to really be looking at who were our parents, who were our grandparents, who were our great grandparents, what was life like for them, right? So anyway, the reason I'm bringing all of this up, one, I don't think people look at that enough. But two, I think it's important for the US because always thinking of the why. I think people don't go enough into the why nowadays. But the US to go back 40 or 50 years, and you brought this up on the last show that we did, where actually, the universities are in crises, but you said this didn't happen in the last 10 years with the snowflake generation. This happened 50 years ago. And again, now we've got two evils, Biden and Trump, that you've got to choose between. But it's not just them, it's something going back 40 to 50 years. So tell us what you're talking about, because you said, this goes 40 to 50 years back. And where do you think that this problem started?
I mean, without going into a lot of detail, but having read all of the original critical race theorists, Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, I could go on, and the origins before them, and that is the extension or the infiltration of Marxism from really the Frankfurt Institute, the Frankfurt School. Don't hold me to this. I want to say late 50s, early 60s.
Cool. And that was in Frankfurt in Germany, sorry? Or?
Yeah.
Cool.
Affirmative action is an extension of that. So if you can't have class warfare, I mean, think about let's do it like, what's race? I mean, what's a white skin, a black skin? It's immutable. It can never change. Whereas, if the world is trying to pit me against you around class, the money I make versus what you make, I mean, that can change.
Yeah.
Right? You can make more money, I can make less, whatever, but you and I are probably going to be white to the day we die, unless, we go out of our way. So, I think what we saw was coming out of World War II, in certain sects of Germany, this idea that Marxism really wasn't going to take hold like I think these neo-Marxists wanted. They came over here and brought critical theory. And then that began to infiltrate in very small parts of academia, and it evolved into critical race theory, critical something theory. And out of that came affirmative action. DEI is just an extension of critical theory because it makes preferences. It's not that I don't think we didn't need it. We didn't need to shore up, inequities. That's separate. Redlining in Minnesota, where you're basically manipulating values of homes because people are black versus white. Okay, that's got to be addressed. But affirmative action and its extension into all of our lives for 50 years now to shore up inequities because of Jim Crow and slavery, is what was addressed. And I mean, I think it's Prop 47 in California. I can't remember, hold me to it, but for years, Californians have voted against racial preferences, and yet people have still done it. I mean, there's a whole narrative that doesn't get talked about in mainstream media. I guess the most relevant thing, this is just recent. Sonny Hostin is one of the hosts on The View, mixed. I think she's part Puerto Rican, black, white. I don't know. She's she's mixed. And she's a hardcore left, what I would call racist, but believes that we should have reparations, and just did a genealogy thing and found out her family, part of her family were slave owners. So underneath that paradigm, underneath that calculus, I mean, how is she going to square that and still found a way to ideological say, well, we still need reparations? No, I mean, according to that, you owe somebody money. I mean, it just becomes ridiculous as you go from, and all of it comes from Marxism. It's all about dividing.
Yeah.
You know, it's separate from saying, hey,
Yes.
what happened in X hundred years of slavery and then Jim Crow into the civil rights era? That's real.
No.
But when you can have a situation where, or when you have asymmetry in terms of standards, like Secretary Austin or
Yeah.
Sonny Halston, like the same rules are not going to apply
Yeah.
based on their calculus of progressively shoring up inequities because of disparities of the past. That's what I think you're seeing on the Democratic left. People are defecting because they're saying these people are wacko, man. Like, I'm sick of race. I don't want to hear it anymore. Okay. And I'm not speaking for myself so much, although I do agree with that. I'm saying you're seeing people on the left. We don't have 51% consensus on the left of that agenda.
No.
And that's why you saw, for example, in 2020, the changing of the laws for COVID to make it where, you know, we went from 30% mail-in voting to 70%. I mean, those laws are still in the books. In the US, when it's time to vote for the president, we all get in a car and we go down to the school and we vote. And then, Michael Hanson, who's a military, who's in the Navy, who's stuck on a boat somewhere in the, XC, you mail in your ballot. That went from 30 to 70%.
I guess the argument, because well, I'll give you a story actually. So one of my friends, he's quite similar to me. He's quite centrist. So I'm actually someone just in the UK. Obviously, I can't vote in America. I voted for Labour. I voted for Conservatives. I voted for Liberal Democrat. Like I vote on policies at the time. So I think ideology in itself is poison. So I never say I'm Labour for life. I'm Conservative for life, because I just think it's very I think it's very small-minded to do that personally. So he's similar to me, and what he said, I think Joe Biden's going to win the election, but I think what's going to happen is it's going to seem that Trump's voted at first because they're going to count all the in-person votes, and then afterwards they're going to count all the mail-in votes. And the reason that's going to happen, that obviously Biden's going to win with the mail-in votes, is because more of Trump supporters were more of like the anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine. We don't need to get into whether that was right or wrong, whereas the Biden ones were more like, I don't want to go out. I need to take the vaccine. I'm into lockdowns, etc. So there was a lot of people, even though Trump said the vote was stolen, there was a lot of people that were saying that was going to happen before. Whether that's part of the, the conspiracy that Trump is talking about or not, there were people that were saying that like that was the way the election was going to go.
Yeah, I think. Look, I want the Trump agenda. I don't care who the candidate is. I want that agenda back. Okay. But I think Joe Biden can win, because when you look at the 22 midterm, I mean, the 2022 midterms, like, it was just like, okay, we've had 2 years of this nonsense. That was when we had 3.5 million people, sanctuary cities starting to complain, record inflation, 40-year high inflation. I could go on. Like, they're going to give up. The Democratic left is going to give up 40 seats in the House and 20 seats in the Senate. And it didn't happen. The red wave, it didn't happen. I don't think the country is fatigued. I think you've got more people that have defected from the left, but not. I don't think we've gotten our fill of the misery yet. The United States has had it so good for so long. That's just a fact. In many ways, we're so entitled. I think you're still that independent, maybe 3 to 5% that Trump needs to get. He continues. This is all opinion. He continues to offend them, and the indictments against him, that just help firm up the base. Okay, but
Yeah.
what he says and how he says it, that I don't think he can get. I'd like for him to,
Hmm.
but I don't think he can get that 3 to 5% independent. Suburban moms.
Yeah. I think it's
Because
the
suburban moms are doing okay. Not all of them,
yeah.
but they are. If you look at like some of the demographics that have really done well over the past, it's that base that he needs. And he keeps turning them off and offending them. And people look at Joe Biden and say, oh, that's good old Joe Biden from Scranton, even though he's a mean, plagiarizing, lying SOB. That's just, who breathes on little girls. And I mean, I could go down that stuff, but I don't think Donald Trump is gonna get that that he's got to get. The
Yeah.
base is there. The MAGA base is there. You've got some defections in the Black and Latino community, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Good.
Well, what about well, actually, there are two things here that I'm going to talk about. One is so the most popular episode we've done on the podcast wasn't with anyone famous, but just crazy episode, which is a guy who's a psychiatrist for people on death row. And he's interesting because he's a Mexican guy, grew up in California. And there was, I don't know if you remember, like the El Paso shooting that happened. And this was just
so
after,
many, yeah.
Yeah, this was just after Trump had said all that stuff about Mexicans, and basically some guy, even though as you said it was taken out of context, some guy heard the snippets on the media and he had severe mental health problems, going back to all the pharmaceutical stuff we talked about. And then he went to a Walmart in El Paso by the border and he shot like 15 Mexicans, right? And then what was interesting, I asked the guy gave me the context of like, because I didn't know about the shooting. I didn't know this happened after Trump had said that. And I asked the guy, how can you're like a Mexican Californian, how can you represent someone that's like essentially killed your own people, right? And he said, I have to see the darkness of myself in the other person, of like, and this is like very deep psychological stuff where you're seeing like, how do you see yourself in the serial killer, which is obviously like a very dark place to go to. But anyway, this comes back to my thing with Trump is like, I feel like he feeds into this whole thing of I'm the victim mindset, which goes into critical race theory and everything of like lack of accountability in our own lives. And that's why I just feel like Trump and the politically correct and the polarization, they just feed off each other. Because it's like CNN and all the like left-wing people, they need Trump, they need a villain. And then those trans activists, they need Trump needs them as well, because he's got the villain. I just think the whole thing relies one on the other.
Look, you're in sales, coaching, leadership development, right? I mean, he plays into the narrative, part of his a part of the votes he needs plays into this thing. People buy, in this case, vote people they like. And they don't vote for people they don't like. There's a part of him that's not likable. And so, I'm a nobody in this narrative in so much. But if someone were to say, what do I think he should do? He needs to create now a contract with America, like the Republicans did. I think Newt Gingrich did in 1994, and just stick to that for the next 6 months and stay out of this like these emotionally all these psychodramas and melodramas. And part of it is what's going on with the indictments, which we should talk about that a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Most of them don't hold any water. Again, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a legal expert, but I can go read left, right, and then the middle and realize that January 6th, for example, they spent $40 million and found nothing. And then, after they released all these tapes and these just buffoons, it's a stain on this country. But it wasn't an insurrection. These buffoons that are walking around once they breached in the Capitol, escorted by Capitol Police. No one had any weapons. We go on. And, I've watched like the PBS Frontline version of it, and it's so well done in terms of like how he orchestrated it and scripted it. And it took him 128 minutes to call it off. And, it's just that the data's not there when you look at both sides. My point in all that is to say, I can understand if you were attacked like that, I could understand why he gets into the melodramas. And I think some of the responses he's had in the last 2 months, especially that now that I think the Supreme Court has ruled that like you can't be ripping people off of ballots. I mean, these crazy judges in Colorado. I mean, could go on and on. What's going on with Fonnie Willis, where she's now been caught, with one of her lead prosecutors going on junkets using Fulton County's money. I mean, she's one of the lead prosecutors. She's the one that's leading the case against the Georgia voter scam stuff, phone call that he did, so that notwithstanding, I wish he would just focus on, I wish he had somebody, maybe he does, someone in his ear like, you need to create a contract with America. Boom. 10 things. This is what we're going to do. Instead of just talking about it, get it in writing and just run that on every single rally. Hey, I don't want to talk about the cases. I don't want to talk about the cases. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
That I think his polling's already great, but I think he would begin to win some of that key independent vote that he needs, because people aren't better off. There's a certain slice of our the upper elite, white, bi-coastal elites that are better off, but the people in the middle, they're not. They're not. Yeah. Right and left. People between the bi-coastal elites, right and left, they're not better off. The middle class, they're not better off.
So I think you and I are in agreement. We don't have the best situation in the US, and it's also the same in the UK here. And it's funny, my dad has never voted because he's like, I don't agree in the way the political system is run. And if everyone was like me, if no one voted, then it'd have to change the system, right? And obviously some people could say that's very undemocratic, but if it comes to this situation where you've got two parties who are essentially, I don't think they offer anything for me, and it's same in the US from what you're saying. And again, if I was in the US now, I wouldn't be voting because, again, I know you said you like trans policies, but they don't appeal to me. So do we have a crisis both in the US and the UK, because it's very similar, where there's a two-party system? It's very difficult for other parties to get in, versus other countries where there's more like proportional representation in like mainland Europe, etc. So do you think it's not just a crisis of polarization, but it's also like a political crisis where we either need new parties, a change of system, or what do you think on that?
I think it's beyond Trump. You have people that can stay up there for 20, 30. When I say up there on Capitol Hill as senators and mainly senators, but representatives for too long.
No.
What do they say? 70 to 80% of their time once they get in office is all they just get into fundraising. Who's giving them the money? We know it's not Michael Chapman and his $50, right? So what would begin to change things, and I don't think it'll happen in mine and your lifetime combined, is campaign finance reform, term limits, and finance reform. You can't have I mean, I'll tell you, the first time I became aware of like political action committees is when I worked for UPS. Okay, I didn't know what a PAC was. I didn't really want to do much with politics. I voted Republican. Okay, I had no concept. And this is when I was just a young college kid, and it was like I remember my boss saying, "Hey, we were talking about giving to United Way," and he said, "Look, we have a PAC." What's a PAC? Like the Green Bay Packers? What's a PAC? A political action committee that lobbies Congress on behalf of UPS or the industry. I'm not sure how it all worked back then, but make sure you donate. He didn't say that, but that was the intrinsic. Okay, so $10 a month, whatever it was. Those dollars are going up there to help UPS. No, yes, but at scale and for other motives and interests, I'm not sure what the dividing line is there. I know when you have right and left, senators and representatives that can make money based on information they learn from companies on Wall Street, that's a problem. I know when you've got senators that are there until, you want to reach over and check to see if they still have a pulse, right? I don't want to name any names. It's not just Joe Biden who's battling what looks like dementia. Term limits and campaign finance reform. The left is going to outspin the right. The left is where the money is. It used to be the right, the country club golf millionaires. I mean, in the 80s, maybe early 90s, but the left is really, they're going to outspin the right 4-1 with a message. I don't think the message has consensus, but I don't think it matters for that independent who doesn't like a guy who's orange and wacky hair and just says crass things. I think you're going to have the same people that are not going to vote for him because they don't like him. That being said, underneath all that is how we make our laws and how people can influence policy is a problem in Congress. There's some good people in there, but the fact that people can stay in there with a message over and over and over and seemingly take money and not really represent their constituencies, that's a problem.
So the term limit, because obviously there is a term limit for the presidents, but you're saying for the senators as well, right?
Yeah, you can keep getting voted in.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's every 4 and 2 years there's votes, but I mean, saying it's the guy or gal with the most money.
Yeah. What's we're nearly at the hour here. So what's a takeaway you want? Maybe we could, obviously we've been quite negative, I think, around the candidates that we've got available in the nation. Maybe what's something like optimistic or like an action that people can take.
I'll give somebody an action. Go listen to if you don't throw a rock at me. You can block me if you want. I'm obviously going to vote right of center. And I grew up that way. I just think, conservative, conserving, and there's a lot of criticisms that come with that. I don't think I'll just touch on this because we didn't talk, but I don't think the government should be involved at all with what a woman does with her body. But that doesn't mean I'm pro-choice either. There's a whole narrative you can't even talk about, and it's really not for so people. He's this, he's that because he's conservative. Not necessarily. That being said, go get the facts on the go sit through. If you're a right winger, go listen to Joy Reid once a month. If you're a left winger, go listen to Sean Hannity and Fox. Go listen to both sides, and then go find like common denominators of good sources because they're out there.
Yeah, I love
Reuters is great.
Yeah,
I could go down a list of things but you got to vote what you think is best for you and your family and the country.
Absolutely.
And look at where we are,
Yeah.
And try to get past, how you feel about certain people, but people are going to do what they're going to do.
100%. It's funny, actually, in the outro, I was literally going to say something very similar to what you just said. And I know I've seen you share clips of him, of Jordan Peterson, someone, because he's got too political, and I normally don't like talking about politics. And I think sometimes when people get political, they get swarmed by, they get infected by some toxic people in society. But when he first started and he was doing like biblical lectures and all this stuff back in the day, one of the things he said, which I really liked, was he was like, you need conservatives and you need liberals, right? And he said, you need conservatives because you need to maintain traditions from the past. Your society is not just denigrated totally, right? And you keep some traditions, but you also need liberals because without liberals, you don't have innovation and creating a better future, right? So it's actually a constant balance between the two. And that's why, as you said, if you're a liberal, listen to a conservative. If you're a conservative, listen to a liberal. And there's all these shades in the middle that you actually find it very interesting.
Yeah, and when you have a bunch of kids that don't see it your way, that's interesting too. Inside your house, that's a separate. Maybe we could talk about it.
I'm sure we'll be back on for a fourth. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
It's the first time today on the show talking about politics. Michael Chapman and I obviously disagree about certain things related to Trump and Democrats and Republicans and the elections and all this stuff. But we had an open and honest conversation about it. And I think actually the takeaway is going to be the same from both of us. It is that if you are a person who's very hardcore Democrat and you've never voted for Republicans in your life, have a conversation with a friend who you know is Republican and have an open and honest debate about policies, and you'll probably find out that you have more in common than you think, and vice versa. If you're a Republican who's always voted a Republican or only has Republican friends, have a conversation with a Democrat. And likewise, if you're someone that hates Trump, maybe have a conversation with someone that votes for Trump and try and have a conversation with about it, because people are not having conversations anymore. And I really feel like online and social media, it feels like the world is at war. But in real life, when I go out, loads of my friends have different political beliefs from me, different religious beliefs from me, different spiritual beliefs from me, different business beliefs from me, but we have conversation, and that's fun. If everyone thought the same, life would not be interesting. And again, if you're a Jewish person, have a conversation with a Muslim about the Palestinian situation, vice versa. If you're a Muslim, have a conversation with a Jewish person, right? We need to start building bridges with each other, because this polarization we have in society is sickening, and we've got to start by having a conversation. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast, The Cosmic Bridge. So please do that. And if you found this conversation interesting today, subscribe to us. We generally have more balanced conversations. It's not your usual narrative around topics. And even if people have maybe very extreme beliefs, we had someone who was, as I said earlier in the show, we'll put that in the show notes as well, someone who's a psychiatrist to people on death row, think these are fucking mass murderers. How can you represent? We still have conversations. We talk about these things, right? And that's what we're trying to do with this podcast. So if you're similar-minded, press the subscribe button on YouTube, press the subscribe button on Apple, Spotify, etc. And we'll see you next week.